And it's Tuesday, and when we're lucky, that means we get Larry Kudlow. He is the host, of course, of the Kudlow Report on CNBC and the Larry Kudlow Show on WMAL Saturdays at 7 p.m. Hey, Larry, good morning.
Good morning.
So, wow, Cyprus, crazy. I mean, what happened over the weekend in Cyprus and yesterday with the run on the ATMs as everyone was trying to get their money out of their bank after the reports that the Cyprus government would be confiscating currency directly out of people's bank accounts. Was this as serious as it sounded?
Yes, it's a terrible precedent. Never happened before. Crossing the Rubicon. You're right, confiscation. Just taking private property, and it's a horrible thing.
And we talked about this earlier in the show, and there was a real concern amongst many of our listeners that we're only, a couple of steps away from that here in America. Can you quell those fears, or is this the possibility? I mean, people were saying in the 30s they confiscated gold, and now with the way finances are so electronically intermingled, and in many people, the IRS has our bank account numbers because we e-file. I mean, should people be concerned?
I don't think there's a chance we do it here. Not a single remote chance. I mean, remember, these Cyprus bank deposits were insured. They were guaranteed. And we have a very powerful FDIC here, and they would never let that happen. It couldn't possibly happen here.
All right.
Not even in a worst-case scenario, and there'd be no reason for it to happen. The issue in Cyprus was the bailout and the attempt to soak up money through all these depositors. Now, they've changed their tune, even though the parliament hasn't voted. So now they're saying people under 100,000 euros will not be affected. If you have over 100,000 euros, you will be affected. Incidentally, behind all this is all the Russian dirty money laundering. Make no mistake about that. The presence of Russia in this scenario is gigantic. And the reason that they went for the smaller depositors in the first place, 6.75% tax, is because they didn't want to have a higher tax on the Russian money that was in the deposits. Probably now they'd have to raise that tax to about 15 or 20%, which gets Putin very angry. Putin has already spoken out against it. I mean, the Cyprus banking system and economy is very much run by Russia. Make no mistake about that.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, my mic wasn't on. Do you think, Larry, that we have the situation right now when it comes to issues of debt and deficit, that the Republicans don't really have their message together? And if I could get you to pull up cut 11, if over there, Mike. There was some stuff going on this weekend, and where John Boehner was on the Sunday talk shows, and he was asked about whether or not we have an immediate debt crisis. Listen.
We do not have an immediate debt crisis.
Well, is that true? I mean, if you have a looming debt crisis, don't you have an immediate need to fix it?
Yeah, you do. You always have an immediate need to fix it, but we don't have an immediate debt crisis. I agree. Obama said the same thing. It's an odd thing to say because you're trying to push a policy agenda which lowers spending through the sequester and reforms entitlements, and then on the other side pushes for pro-growth tax reform to generate growth revenue. So it's an odd thing to say. But, I mean, technically, no, we don't have a debt crisis. Take a look at our bond market. I mean, you have the lowest interest rates in just about history, I think, or certainly going back to the 1950s. I think sometimes, by the way, there's a little too much emphasis on debt. I think the Republicans have to be careful that their message is very austere.
But when you say that, Larry, I mean, I get that, it's looming. It's out there. It's coming. We all know it's there. But when you say, we don't have an immediate crisis, well, it says to me, well, then I don't have to worry about that. Well, shouldn't the message be we do have to worry about it right now, or we're going to be in a world of hurt and not too long down the future?
Well, I'm not sure I'm not sure Boehner disagrees with that, but the word immediate is an odd word. I mean, look, you're running about 75% publicly held debt to GDP. That's at the high end of the range, but not awful. If you take all debt, including the trust fund debt, Social Security and so forth, you're close to 100%. And that is a bad number. That's a very bad number. So that's probably the way I would put it. And steps have to be taken. This is a good time to make reforms, and I think they should press their own agenda. Republicans have a pretty good agenda. But look, can I just say, the GOP has to be careful. They need a growth message.
Yes.
The best way to deal with debt is to grow the GDP. I'll be honest with you. And by the way, if you grow the GDP, then you won't have to spend as much on various social programs, even though to some extent food stamps have proved that untrue, for the most part.
Right.
And you have had a reduction in spending as a share of GDP. I just want to make that point. And there is some evidence that at least public debt is stabilizing, some evidence. So I don't want to take away from the debt argument. I mostly don't want to take away from the spending and entitlement reform argument or the tax reform argument. But in terms of, I don't know, debilitating confidence and so forth, I wouldn't go nuts over the debt.
Yeah.
I think sometimes Republicans just go too far over the debt. You look at opinion polls, people are much more interested in the economy and jobs than they are in debt.
And it seems to me that you end up losing the argument in the long run. You know, Ronald Reagan, he advocated for smaller government and lower taxes, not because we couldn't afford it, but because it wasn't rooted in the foundation of our documents and the liberty-minded founders that formed this country. As soon as you make it about debt and not being able to afford it, then you've lost the real grounds, the value-based aspect of the argument that will end up growing our economy.
Well, yeah, you got a point there. I mean, look, I worked for Reagan. Reagan was interested in economic growth. That was his mantra. And he was very optimistic that his program of limited government and lower tax rates and less regulation would do that.
And he was right.
And he was right.
He was
Yep.
right. All right,
He was
Larry.
dead right.
Larry Kudlow, thanks.
Right there. Hey, Larry, always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
All right, that is Larry Kudlow. We'll talk to him next